Welcome acolytes. Let's do ENDYMION today. I'm reacting to his Warhammer 40k Space Marine Reject Woke agenda. Modern gaming pushed insane proud demands. I misspelled it. This wasn't even good, but it's fine. I just heard some whispers that Henry Cavill's the man that actually played a good Geralt of Rivia has a victory under his belt. And I am happy about that. And I hope this is some positive freaking messaging here. But if you like my content, leave a like, leave a comment, press the notification button, and show me and ENDYMION some love. Let's start.
Friends, it's ENDYMION, and while the future may look grim and dark in some ways, could Warhammer be making a comeback? And beyond this,
I hope so, because the last messages were so shitty with Warhammer. I honestly gave it halfway up. I am waiting and looking for this last spark of hope.
I want to look into how modern gaming engines are now attempting to police almost every aspect of language when it comes to game development and future games. Firstly, from that Park Place, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 claims to have no microtransactions but features Season Pass and paid cosmetic options. In case you don't know, Space Marine 2 is coming this...
Wait, what? Isn't that a solo game? What the fuck? Space Marines 2. Is this an online game? And by skill and brutality, Space Marines, one different dangerous spectacle. And 40k action adventure war game, advanced action, people Warhammer Space Marine God Edition, people Space Marine exclusive. Yeah, it seems so. It could be a multiplayer thing. Huh. Wouldn't be the worst thing though. Sounds fun. Especially if you do it in a freaking mass slaughter thing. Yeah, it looks like a multiplayer thing. Whoa.
This fall for all the usual platforms. Well, maybe not Switch, it would probably explode if it ran on there, but you get the idea. Also, I apologize about the footage at times here because YouTube hates blood, so I gotta gray the footage, so my apologies. Anyway, the game seems to be going for a Helldivers-like model to a certain degree, and this could end up working in their favor.
Vermintide Helldivers mix. Yes. Yes.
Possibly. Just like Helldivers, Space Marine 2 plans to offer a multiplayer experience that allows for you to customize your own Space Marine. The game will have a PvE or player versus environment mode, in case you didn't know what that meant, alongside PvP, and a full story mode where you play as Titus.
Okay.
All of this sounds great, although it does worry me to some degree that the game will be laced with identity politics regardless. Considering the absolute state of Warhammer right now, from the fans' backlash on various things to editors pushing for things like trans Space Marines, it's all kind of a mess, and that's putting it lightly. It also raised people's eyebrows when the lead writer on Space Marine 2 is a trans writer named Ashley Cooper, who has in the past voiced their opinions against people's rights to play what they want and not be judged for it. By the way,
of course there is some... Oh my... Okay.
Don't harass this person or anything, let's just look at what they're saying, but to give you some context, Space Marine 2's lead writer has said things like this in the past. If you're going to insist on playing the Wizard game, stop bending yourself into a pretzel trying to find a way to explain or justify doing so. And have the conviction to just say transphobia is not a deal breaker for me. This obviously rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and Hogwarts Legacy went on to sell...
A-hole. Total a-hole. Do I really have to mention more about it? For F's sake. Yeah, I misclicked by the way, but it's incredible that this a-hole actually got out with this, like without any... I don't get it. How can you even freaking justify this?
Gangbusters anyways. It basically resulted in the Streisand effect if it also went Super Saiyan pretty much. That being said, this is who is writing Space Marine 2, which personally, I don't mind if someone trans is writing a game as long as they understand that the game needs to adhere to its principles and world.
No, there is a very, very, very small amount of people that actually give a shit about it. Most people do not care. They just see it, will I like it? Yes, no, good. I do not care who's behind it, as long as I get a good story. But the fact in the matter is that if you have some activists, or especially certain activists, then the chance of the entire thing being bad is way higher, as if you didn't have it. So yes, it's just, I just don't even know how to explain it correctly, because right, it's always the same. It's almost always the same. And still, this stuff still happens again and again and again. But yeah, if you go for politics and not actual quality, yeah, I assume this will happen.
Before real-world politics. But I would be very naive to believe otherwise, that this may not be the case. However, I was also wrong about Beau DeMayo when it came to X-Men 97, and that ended up being great. So while this game could end up being a disaster of epic proportions, I am holding out hope that maybe this ends up being another X-Men 97 situation. Plus, from the trailers alone, there seems to be plenty of diversity in the main cast anyways. You got white, black, and Asian male Space Marines aplenty, which I'm totally fine with because they all look like they eat diamonds for breakfast like...
Yeah, that's not a problem. There isn't any specific thing where you say, okay, there are no Asian space. It's irrelevant. This is totally irrelevant, because at the end of the day, yes, you come from a certain planet, and if the planet is full of Asians, that's fine. Then you're gonna get most Asians. If it's mixed, you get mixed. If it's the normally it's not. Normally it's a specific planet thing, like Vulcan. The salamanders, they're mostly just basically charcoal black. So this would be a bit sassy, but I think for the most part, if you just get a planet and just, it's an Asian guy, okay, yeah, it's a Space Marine nonetheless.
Look at those jaw lines, hell yeah, brother. However, I would be lying if I wasn't going to admit I'm worried that they'll try to use the game's release to bend the rules and status quo of the Warhammer universe somehow. The hope is that this writer, or any other on the project, don't attempt to push trans Space Marines or anything like that. And that's not because trans people should not exist or anything, but simply because this is Warhammer.
A Space Marine wouldn't give a single shit about it. A Space Marine wants fighting. A Space Marine is freaking bred to fight. He wouldn't care about his trans things. He just wouldn't. Not a single Space Marine would. Except it would be somehow good for fighting. Then maybe. Then yeah, if they could like get some advantage out of it, then maybe. But even then.
It is a franchise that has and should continue to appeal to its main audience, which is, whether you like to admit it or not, straight males. I don't want to see a female Space Marine about as much as I would want to see a male Sisters of Silence. Neither should ever exist. I don't want to think of...
I agree with him. It just doesn't make sense. A female freaking Sister Asoritas wouldn't make sense, just like a female Space Marine doesn't make sense.
About the outside world when I'm tearing into aliens with my friends. I just want to have fun and keep politics out of this. While Space Marine seems to be taking the Helldivers approach to monetization, which I understand some people may be angry saying it's a full-priced game, why does it have cosmetics?
Yeah.
But the sad reality is that online servers need to be maintained and paid for on a monthly basis. And pretty much, if you want to have your online Warhammer experience, something needs to keep those lights on, hence monetization. Look, I'm with you. I don't like this feature either, and of course you don't have to buy them either, just like in Helldiver's case as well. But I do think the idea of allowing all the content to be free once you've paid for the game, as in enemies, new maps, weapons, etc., it's a good thing for players. Although we are entering a weird place where even single player games are starting to become live service in a sense too. A good example of this working in the company's favor is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is currently Ubisoft's second most profitable game of all time, with only Rainbow Six Siege beating it out. That game has had multiple expansions where you can visit Paris, Scotland, and even the land of the dwarves in Dawn of Ragnarok. Not to mention they have free updates and even a roguelite mode, and the game of course has a big ass cash shop that's full of paid cosmetics too. As someone who played Valhalla and has played the expansions, I think they're fun, although I've never bought a single cosmetic item myself. But the success of something like Valhalla is what should be what games like Space Marine 2 should replicate to a degree. And what I mean by that is Valhalla is pretty free of most woke nonsense, at least to the best of my knowledge. And the only stupid part of the game is apparently that female Eivor is the canon version of the character. Yet every single CGI trailer and even the cover of the game features the male Eivor variant because Ubisoft knows that games with men on covers sell more. And this just kind of proves that what I've been saying is that when you just make these sorts of games about Vikings, Space Marines, big alien monsters and whatnot, the point here is that all of these things I mentioned are stuff your average male player wants to and play as. Creating these experiences for another audience is moronic when you have all the IP tools and whatnot in front of you to make a banging release on your hands. Space Marine doesn't need to become the next Suicide Squad, but it could become the next Helldivers instead. Honestly, the entire time I was playing Helldivers, I kept thinking to myself, man, imagine this game, but replace everything with Warhammer, and imagine how sick that would be, and it's true. The potential...
Well, imagine. Yes, please, do it!
For a make-your-own Space Marine Helldivers-esque multiplayer mode could do gangbusters if done right. But at the same time, they're walking a very tight rope, because this shit could fall either way based on what these developers and writers go with. Space Marine 2 could easily become Warhammer's and Focus Entertainment's biggest release ever. But the point here is that they need to realize who this is being made for. If it stays authentically Warhammer and removes the real-world politics, then yes, we're about to see Helldivers 2.0 happen right in front of our eyes. But if they do bend the knee and go full identity politics and chasing agendas, then we have Suicide Squad 2.0 instead. And that would be really shitty, all things considered. Many games I loved have gone down the identity political angle. For example, Destiny 2. Which for I would say 2 or 3 years, they just kept adding nonsensical, unnecessary identity politics into the game. Confirming that characters like Saint 14, who's a robot by the way, was in a gay relationship with Osiris, who's an old human warlock. Bungie then made this a thing where they would just start confirming the gender identities of various characters as time went on, which did nothing for the game at all. In fact, at the height of their failure,
Yeah, I actually... Destiny was so shitty at the start. Well, okay, it's not my kind of game, so there's that. So, I'm maybe not the best guy to talk about it, but... Well, yeah, it is what it is, I guess.
Bungie released Lightfall, which was probably the most disappointing release in Bungie's history outside of maybe Curse of Osiris. But in Lightfall, Bungie made a point of making Nimbus a character that was a big marketing point for the game's story to be very prominent. Nimbus, if you don't know, is a Cloud Strider, and they're also, from what players could understand, trans or non-binary or something. Honestly, I still don't really know. The character was voiced by a trans actor, and all in all, if you ask any Destiny 2 player, they'll likely tell you that they don't like Nimbus. Most of them probably even forgot the character exists in the first place. Because Nimbus, from the design, story, and everything else, nothing helped this character stand out. They looked like a weird, non-Destiny character within that universe, and Lightfall's release, which was successful in terms of pre-orders due to hype, it resulted in Destiny 2's player base cratering, and that's putting it lightly. The mass exodus of players from Destiny 2 was biblical. Bungie was reeling in losses as they ended up missing their financial forecast by around 50% around this time. And the studio, which seemed bulletproof against layoffs, suddenly started letting people go, even veteran devs who were integral to Bungie's identity. For the past year and then some, Bungie has been pretty much playing catch up with the community, trying to do everything they can to mitigate the damage that Lightfall had done to their live service game that pretty much just keeps their lights on. And all of this happened to them because Bungie decided to chase identity politics and lie to players by under-delivering content in the hopes of keeping them happy enough.
Same
old, I would say. Yeah, it's just... yeah, it makes sense.
Until the next real expansion released, which is the Final Shape. Which, as of the making of this video, it's not out yet, but it's being touted as Bungie's biggest release yet for Destiny 2. And I mean, it should be. It's the swan song to Destiny's 10-year story, so it needs to hit and land perfectly with fans, or they're screwed. So why am I talking about Destiny in a video about Warhammer, Helldivers, and more? Because we need to understand how quickly the goodwill and the destruction of an IP in a community can happen. With Destiny, the self-imposed destruction took place over a month or two until the game hit record low numbers on platforms. And it was all because Bungie was suddenly far more interested in pushing identity politics and characters that nobody cared about, instead of focusing on what players really wanted, which was fun, replayable content that rewarded them with a good story and not annoying characters. And whether we want to admit it or not, Nimbus is peak annoying. Seriously, if we never see that character again in Destiny's universe, it will be too soon. Nimbus is ass, complete garbage in every regard. And before you say it's because the voice actor is trans, no. Just look at Nimbus's design. It's god-awful. Like, who is this character for? I'll even admit, I had to Google what this character's name was when I was writing this because I genuinely forgot because they're so forgettable. The point here is that what happened to Destiny or Suicide Squad could very easily happen to Space Marine 2. And while Destiny does seem to be on the uptick in terms of players and such, it took them pretty much an entire year to somewhat win players' trust back. But you can see how easily these things can be broken, and it's incredible Bungie didn't realize that their player base actually just wants a fun game to play with their friends without identity politics. Who could have guessed, right? And honestly, even with Helldivers right now, they're losing players at an alarming rate too, from Eurogamer. Helldivers 2 sees huge drop in player numbers since release. The player base has apparently been reduced by around 62% since the month prior, which is puzzling people as to why that's happening. Could it be that Helldivers has lost touch with the audience, or is it something more? In my opinion, it's a multitude of reasons, and they're all self-inflicted. After the whole Sony PSN account thing, a lot of people just dropped the game and never looked back pretty much. And even though Sony reversed that decision, it still didn't really help by increasing numbers anyways, because players quickly realized that on a dime, their game and time investment could be thrown into the gutter on a whim by the people in charge.
Yep.
And while now technically Helldivers is the same it's always been, either pre-PSN account or after, the truth is simply that Sony, in their moronic infinite wisdom, decided to ruin the trust with the community for literally no reason at all. And now, like Destiny had to deal with, Helldivers pretty much needs to work to win back players to their side. But I doubt that any major updates will be coming soon, since Destiny and Helldivers are both owned by Sony themselves. And since the...
Yeah, I mean, even I loved Helldivers, like I did. But yes, this whim thing, this can just happen like that, and my entire time will be just destroyed just because some fucker decided to, well, do something shitty. It's effed up, man.
The Final Shape is coming, Sony probably doesn't want to mess up the release of that expansion. So they're going to tell Arrowhead to slow down on updates in June to give Destiny its time to shine and blow up with players to make money. Basically, Sony doesn't want Destiny 2's new release competing with new content drops in Helldivers 2 around the same time. Which, yes, they would benefit from both doing well simultaneously. They likely think it'll eat into Destiny 2's sales if that were to happen. But circling back to Warhammer, this is why Space Marine is in a very unique position right now. They're currently having all of these examples around them, showing them how to not make an online game happen. If Helldivers and Destiny can falter and bleed goodwill in players as fast as they have, Space Marine could easily suffer the same fate and end up even worse than they are. In Helldivers and Destiny's case, they're Sony games, so they have that seal of quality, if you will, that other games don't really have. And look, no shame to Focus Entertainment and Games Workshop, but Focus isn't exactly known for super polished releases. Many of their game releases are a little janky or clunky, which is fine to a degree, it has a charm to it, but if you want to rise up to the A-list, you kinda need to bring your A game too. And after years of work on Space Marine 2 from the devs to even a full year delay on their part, all the multiplayer maps, modes, guns, gear, cosmetics, single player mode, it will mean absolutely nothing if any single cog in that machine decides to disrespect the audience. All of that will be undone if Space Marine 2's story suddenly pushes a female or trans Space Marine. Or if a female Adeptus Custodi or something just shows up in the story randomly, oh good, that'd be awful. And need I remind you, currently, we don't even know if Space Marine 2's character customization will offer typical Western slop like body type options. Because in case you don't know, Western games have largely abandoned gender and character creators for body types instead. Male is usually type 1, female is type 2. Imagine the backlash when Space Marine comes out and players jump into multiplayer, only to find that body type variations exist in Space Marine 2. And if one of those body types ends up making the Space Marine smaller or a little curvier or less manly, the backlash will be crazy.
It should be crazy. It should be a freaking path of destruction to this. Because anything less will actually make the entire thing worse. So, and this is the only thing that works, by the way. So, yeah, because talking like you want to talk to normal people just doesn't work. Sadly, it just doesn't work. I am trying to be as positive as I can, but honestly, the only thing that works is just in the face. And it's sad. I don't even agree with it, but it is what it is. You have to do the most effective, not the most effective thing, you should do the most sensible thing. But the most sensible thing is, being aggressive about it. Sorry.
Because if that...
And I don't mean absolutely toxic, I mean aggressive in a sense of just going forward with your opinion, really, really pushing it. Not just saying or talking and just pushing it.
That happens. Focus and Games Workshop could say, oh no, those other body types are just different male bodies or something. But players aren't stupid. They'll see the smaller Space Marine and go, you're trying to add female Space Marine variants without saying it, aren't you? Which is why I truly hope Space Marine 2 has a playable open beta or something eventually so we can confirm this. Because players need to see the customization options and see if the game does indeed try to sneak in a little gender bender, hoping none of us will notice. But Games Workshop and Focus Entertainment are trying to assure fans that this will be an authentic Warhammer experience, they said via a press release, and I quote, "The content of the game has been locked for a while now, and we're in the final stages of the game's production. Most of our efforts are currently focused on debugging and polishing to pass the final certification steps. We want to deliver the cleanest possible experience at launch, and the team is fully focused on it. The core game features a gripping narrative that follows fan-favorite Lieutenant Titus, powerfully portrayed by actor Clive Standen. After you get reinstated as a Space Marine, embody the superhuman skill and brutality of the greatest of the Emperor's warriors. Unleash deadly abilities in an arsenal of devastating weaponry to obliterate the relentless Tyrannid hordes. The game is now poised to ship in the second half of 2024 to provide the time needed to properly polish the game and to ensure the best possible experience. Focus Entertainment is committed to releasing a game that is of the highest quality and that exceeds the expectations of the countless fans of the franchise." End quote. To show you how much is riding on this apparently across all platforms according to Games Workshop and Focus, Space Marine 2 has over 1 million wish lists as of the end of 2023. It's likely even higher now. They have a lot riding on this, and that's putting it lightly. They cannot afford to screw this up, but I guess we'll see. Also, do you like...
Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting, by the way, because I would freaking love having a Space Marine game. I would be so happy if it just works. I would love it. But yeah, we have to see at the end here.
Pronouns? No? Well, you're probably sexist according to this next story from Bounding Into Comics titled, "Unreal Engine coding standards require video game studios to use inclusive language in programming and documentation." This is really stupid and wild, but I figure I just read you what it says, cause my lord dude, here's what Epic Games, the creators of Unreal and stuff like Fortnite said, and I quote, "Word choice applies when you name classes, functions, data structures, types, variables, files, and folders. And plugins, it applies when you write snippets of user-facing text for the UI, error messages, and notifications. It also applies when writing about code, such as in comments and change list descriptions. Do not use metaphors or similes that reinforce stereotypes. Examples include contrast black and white or blacklist and whitelist. Do not use words that refer to historical trauma or lived experiences of discrimination. Examples include slave, master, and nuke. Refer to hypothetical people as they, them, and their, even in the singular, and anything that is not a person as it and its. For example, a module, plugin, function, client, server, or any other software or hardware component. Further, users are asked to not assign a gender to anything that doesn't have one, nor use collective nouns like guys that assume gender. And also take care to avoid colloquial phrases that contain arbitrary genders like a poor man's ex. Remember that your words are being read by a global audience that may not share the same idioms and attitudes and who might not understand the same cultural references. And thus aim to avoid slang and colloquialisms even if you think they are funny or harmless, particularly as they may be hard to understand for people whose first language is not English and might not translate well. Do not use profanity or overloaded words, as many terms that we use for their technical meanings also have other meanings outside of technology. Examples include abort, execute, or native. When you use words like these, always be precise and examine the context in which they appear." End quote. Holy crap, so if you manage to jump through all of these hoops and sanitize every single part of whatever it is you're making, then you're okay in the eyes of the Western dev stratosphere. Basically, you need to sand off all the edges, use only words these companies like, and then maybe you can make a game that you can sell. I find all of this very stupid, and this policing of words, phrases, and such will do nothing but lessen our content as a whole. There's nothing wrong with exploring ideas like master versus slave within the confines of a video game. After all, Final Fantasy XVI's story has a lot to do with that concept already, and it worked great in my opinion. And I think when you deliberately adhere to these rules, you just end up with a product for absolutely nobody. The point of video games, as well as entertainment mediums in general, is to allow players to experience and be able to understand things they may not see in real life. Besides dragons and magic, I think playing a game from the perspective of a slave like Clive in Final Fantasy XVI is a good idea, because it allows people to see that the concept of slave versus master, it goes beyond just your skin color or your race. At the same time, policing things like saying terms like black or whitelist is bad, that's just stupid in my opinion. Not to mention the part where Epic says you should avoid slang or colloquialisms because they may not translate into other languages correctly. But from what I've been seeing, that's just a roundabout way of saying let localizers be vocalizers, and allow them to change shit to fit their sheltered agenda, which isn't a good idea either, and if anything, players want the original unsanitized version just translated into their native language. Whether it's offensive or not, let the players decide. The point is that the original creators' visions and ideas were kept intact, and I think that's really important. Ultimately, nothing Epic is saying here is a good idea in my book, and it will just lead to plenty of half-baked sanitized games that are devoid of anything important to say at all. Imagine you're trying to make a game like Warhammer on Unreal and Epic goes, make sure to not use terms like heresy or execution, they may be triggering. Like, that's stupid to do, just stop that. Freedom of expression is important, both creatively and socially, and I think bending through hoops to appease this stuff is the worst thing you can do in the long run. Like the examples I already presented proving that when you bend over backwards, you end up appeasing nobody. So to do these changes do nothing but make things worse for you as well. None of this is a good idea, and it's in your best interest to take these rules, roll them up nice and tight, and then burn them with a lighter, and then just do your own thing instead. If you learn anything from this video, it's to stay true and don't appease weirdos who wouldn't support you anyways in the first.
I love this guy. This is just so on point. I just I couldn't even say any. This is you know what, Endymion, thank you. This is just stop supporting freaks, guys. Just stop. Don't support freaks. Thank you. But as it is, acolytes, I'm done for today. Good night.